right, we'd like to call this meeting of the West Allis West Milwaukee School District to order, please. If you could please rise for the pledge. Mr. Ustra, could you please lead us?
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you all very much. Suzette, could you do the roll, please?
Yes. Mr. Schultz.
Present.
Mr. Ustra.
Here.
Mr. Bailey.
Present.
Mr. Keller.
Here.
Ms. Klug. Here. Mrs. Justum. Here. Mr. Sikich.
Present.
Mr. Lee.
Here.
President Emmons.
Here. Proper notice of this meeting has been posted in accordance with the open meeting laws of the state of Wisconsin. Do we have any additions or modifications to tonight's agenda?
I have nothing.
Board members? Okay. All right, we'll go on to public comments. And then we'll move on to item 7, the superintendent's report.
All right, thank you. As we're now in summer mode, there's no school showcases or student representatives, so we'll go right into legislative update. So Republicans on the Joint Finance Committee approved putting an additional $500 million into K-12 education over the next 2 years. The budget included an additional $97 million for special education. This is the first increase in special education aid in more than a decade, but overall fell well short of the $1.4 billion increase that Governor Tony Evers proposed. The Assembly GOP plan includes raising the revenue limits by $200 per student in the first year of the budget and an additional $204 in the second. Some of that increase would be paid for by property tax increases. $50 million more in funding for special education, that's a 13% increase. An additional $20 million for student mental health, an additional $4.6 million for high-cost transportation, and then raising the revenue caps for low-spending districts to $10,000 over the next 2 years. They're now set at $9,400. That last item wouldn't impact our district. At this point, we're still a little bit above $10,000. So the Evers budget was projected to result in an increase in property tax bills of $56 in the first year of the budget and $48 in the second year. That amounts to an increase of 2% and 1.6% respectively. Voss said the Assembly GOP plan would result in increases of less than 1%. So that's where we are in the budget. Keep in mind that the governor of the state of Wisconsin has a pretty broad veto power in the budget. You can change numbers and letters individually to create something else. So there's still some unknowns of where this is going, but we're now building our budget projections based on kind of where we are with what the Joint Finance Committee has done. All right, I will go into district recognitions. There's a bunch of them today. So first, congratulations to the graduating class of 2019 at West Allis Central. The class was awarded $1.64 million in scholarships. The valedictorian is Joseph Koenig, and the salutatorian, Holden Skeels. In the top 10, Joseph Koenig, Holden Skeels, Michaela Molson, Hunter Turson, Julia Jaros, Tyler Drezick, Riley Whitted, Sierra Malvitz, Jacob Fierst, and Alexander Rodriguez. And at West Allis, Nathan Hale, the class of 2019, was awarded $2.6 million in scholarships. There, the valedictorian was Anna Coleman and the salutatorian Erica Kester. In the top 10, again, Anna Coleman and Erica Kester, along with Joseph Robers, Olivia Tierks, Isabella Kirkpatrick, Kimberly Winston, Isaac Lawson, Emily Hayes, Paige Shar, and Grady Wagner. At James Z. Dodke, $70,000 in scholarships, and at Shared Journeys, $107,000 in scholarships. So congratulations to all the seniors. And then at Central High School, Sodexo's Chef Jorge was recognized by the senior class for being a person that has a positive impact on the school. We think that's kind of cool to have, somebody that often we think of as behind the scenes at being really influential among our kids, and so we're really proud of that. At Shared Journeys, Destiny Roberts, Danilich Haben, and Amber Muffler were selected to attend a fully paid summer camp for teen parents in Michigan. Destiny Roberts and Amber Muffler successfully completed their CNA training. The Bradley Foundation awarded a $50,000 grant for the infant lab, and the Knights of Columbus presented a $40,000 gift to install the emergency door exit in the infant lab. At Frank Lloyd Wright Intermediate School, Carrie Clark, with the help of Madeline Meg, Ashley Gorski, Crystal Clem, Jennifer Kimka, Joe Larisic, Caitlin LeMay, Jennifer Krause, Kelly Dodge, and Kristen Morrissey, along with Joe Wesolowski, Mary Jo Martin, and Sean Amber Peer, and Casey Switlick organized the Food Drive for Your School event on May 15th, 2019. The amazing FLW crew raised $8,000 for FLW's deeper learning communities. At Irving Elementary School, congratulations to special education teacher Christina Martello, who was awarded the Cooperating Teacher Service Award for Exceptional Education from the University of Wisconsin at Milwaukee. And congratulations to the Irving PTA for being awarded the District PTA of the Year at the district banquet on May 17th, 2019. At Jefferson Elementary School, 4K teacher Anna Robillard received $200 from Jefferson PTA for flexible seating in her classroom, and music teacher Robin Utke received $800 from Jefferson PTA to attend opera for the young. At Madison Elementary School, Edward Larona, 5K, was recognized by the West Allis Police for making a heroic phone call to 911 that helped bring medical personnel to his home. At Pershing Elementary School, Kristen Pagankoff represented Pershing and Madison on May 20th, 2019, as Pershing once again received the Wisconsin DPI School of Recognition Award for the 4th time in the last 5 years. Also at Pershing, Barbara Grandma Hart has volunteered at Pershing Elementary School every Wednesday since 2007. And over the past 12 years, she has read over 978 books to 4K students. I don't know how we kept track of that, but apparently we did. Her dedication and compassion for students knows no limits, and her presence will be sorely missed. So we really appreciate that kind of commitment to our kids. At Walker Elementary School, we'd like to thank Amanda Barber, Katie Hart, and the rest of the Walker staff for organizing and running a successful home and school connection night on May 23rd, 2019. Amanda worked with the Coles Wild Theater Program to offer a free theater show for our families. Students also met with their team teachers to co-create a summer learning contract for how students were going to avoid the summer slide and continue learning over the summer. We currently have 91% of our students that have created a summer learning contract with their teachers so far. And leadership and learning, Brooke Smith represented the work she and the team from Pershing are doing around PBS and social emotional learning, SEL, for a webinar with Ed Week. She did an amazing job of sharing the successes at Pershing and the work across our district. And Brandon Lindsay was selected to join a team comprised of teachers, college advisors, professors, and business partners to write the new personal financial literacy standards for Wisconsin. And in communications, on Friday, May 31st, 2019, the owner of Fujiyama Restaurant at 2916 South 108th Street in West Allis donated $1,000 to the West Allis Milwaukee School District Education Foundation. Fujiyama Restaurant has been a supportive partner making this donation annually since the launch of the foundation. So we appreciate all of that that's been going on in our school district. And then just a couple quick updates. There were no public comments from our meeting on May 20th. I want to another shout out to congratulations to all the 5th, 8th, and 12th grade students that are moving on to new things. I want to do a special shout out for the work being done at Franklin, in particular Jordan Pollard and the cardboard boat launch that was really fun to participate in. We had MK Misfits there recording, and I was sure I was going to get footage of a kid kind of jumping over in the pool, and every boat floated and worked. So Jordan was like, okay, I wasn't expecting that. A quick update on the facility manager. So we've identified 3 candidates or applicants that we're moving to the second round interviews. Those will take place next week. And that's more the peer base, so it's really built of the team in facilities and operations. I'm currently doing the end-of-year reviews with all of the principals and the leadership team, so that's the final step in the principal evaluation process. So I was out in 4 different schools today. Those are about an hour and a half conversations. And then lastly, to everybody that's out there listening, I want to thank everybody for a really great year and to tell everyone have a safe summer.
Great. All right, thank you. Okay, so we will go on to the review of the board calendar. So today, June 10th, we have a regular Board of Education meeting, and immediately following, we have 2 workshops, one on elementary report cards and grading practices, and the proposed 2019-2020 budget and preliminary tax levy number 2. And immediately following that, we will have a closed session meeting. On Monday, June 17th at 6 o'clock, we will have a workshop, benefits review and other post-employee benefits. On Monday, June 24th, beginning at 6 p.m., a regular Board of Education meeting. And then following that, a workshop on equity mindset and equity non-negotiables. Then we have a meeting on Monday, July 8th, beginning at 6 p.m., and that's just a regular Board of Education meeting. There will be no workshop on Monday, July 15th. And on Monday, July 22nd at 6 p.m., a regular Board of Education meeting. Do any board members have any community updates? Jeff?
The West Allis, West Milwaukee Monogram Club is having their annual chicken dinner, and that raises money for the student athlete scholarships and financial aid. And it is on Saturday, June 22nd, and we've kind of nicknamed it, we're allowing you to buy a ticket and donate it to a veteran. You do not have to be there to pick it up. I simply write on the ticket, donate to a vet, and they deliver all those meals over to the VA center. This is held at St. Florian's Church in their parking lot, so it's a short trip. Tickets are $12, and they can be purchased, and they make great Father's Day gifts.
Good plug.
And then I'd just like to give a shout out to Jackie Jacoby. I received the invite, I'm sure other members, I saw Gary and, I saw somebody else. Oh, I'm sorry, Noah. The participants in her program, to see how excited they were to get the awards they were given, just, did you good to watch.
Yeah, I agree with Jeff. It was just a fantastic event.
That's all I
All
have.
right, good. Dan?
We have breaking new ground at the Recreation Center. That's going to be on June 12th, 2019 at 4 p.m.
Anybody else? All right, and thank you to all the board members for being at all of our graduations and for wishing a wonderful send-off to our 12th graders. So all the ceremonies were emotional and fun and high-spirited and full of hope and optimism, so it was really a great thing to see. So, all right, we will then move on to our consent agenda for the evening. Item 9.1 is the approval of minutes from the May 20th regular Board of Education meeting. Item 9.2 is the employment summary. Item 9.3 are the supplementary contracts. Does anyone need anything separated? If not, we would look for a motion.
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Any additional comments or questions? If not, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, that passes. All right, we will go on to our action items for the evening. Item 10.1, the Shared Journeys Charter School Renewal for 2019 through 2024.
Okay, I'll do a little introduction here. So we had been, in the past, our district has been doing this update or the contract renewal annually. And often authorizers will do that if they're not sure about the performance of a charter school, so that they can review it regularly, and if there are concerns, they can change the contract or not renew the contract. We don't have those concerns with Shared Journeys. We're really proud of the work that they've been doing and the kind of dollars that, external dollars that come in to help support the program. So we worked with Lisa Cola, and Deidre and I met with the board of Shared Journeys and proposed that we would enter into a 5-year contract. So we don't need to revisit this until 2024. We did have our attorneys, so Dan Valit and Claire Hartley reviewed the contract, updated some language that's more current than what was in our current kind of template. And so that's what we have in front of you. So I don't know if you want to add anything.
Yeah, I would just echo Marty's sentiments, is that as much as we enjoy having Lisa come back year after year and have to go through this rigmarole all over again, I think it's a strong statement of support for the program and for the work that they've done at Shared Journeys to move to a 5-year contract. Her board was really excited about that, and Lisa's relief on her face that she wouldn't have to rewrite that contract every day. I was like, oh, this is a really good one.
Yes.
So we would certainly support going to a 5-year contract for Shared Journeys. Manuel?
So is this guaranteed that Lisa's gonna be here until 2024? Is that what I'm hearing as well?
But she occasionally asks me about early retirement, and I'm like, I'm sorry, you're not allowed to talk about that. Yeah, so I said, oh, you young sprightly thing, you're not going anywhere anytime soon.
That's why I like Deidre so much. Young.
Lisa is still in the same contracts that we have for the rest of the employees in her category group. But yes, it is our hope that Lisa sticks with it for a long time, and we've actually started thinking about some transition planning for the day
Yes.
that
Yes.
Lisa does decide that she is ready to move on, so that we have a smooth transition for somebody to take over, because much of it right now is done by Lisa independently. So we're working on it.
Any other comments or questions? If not, we'd look for a motion.
So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any additional comments or questions? If not, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right. Well, you still have to come back and see us.
Yes, I will do that. Thank you so much.
All right, item 10.2, the WIAA Senior High Membership Renewal Applications for 2019 through 2020.
And so this is an annual item that we do have to do every year. So it's really the and the board needs to take, the school boards need to take action to approve the renewal of the WIAA membership for both, there's one here for Central and one for Nathan Hale.
Move to approve?
Second?
I was just gonna say, hockey's not checked, but is that because we already did that earlier this year?
For Central, it was
Hockey's
for
checked.
girls, right?
Girls hockey's checked for
Yeah,
Central.
Boys
non-contact.
sports, though, it is not, is it just considered under
It's just-
Central?
I think we were just doing girls.
It was just the one girl.
Oh, okay.
Yep.
However, I have a question.
Mhm.
I thought, and I could be wrong, but I thought there was a girls' golf team at Hale. That's not checked. And I thought this because my niece played.
Oh. So let me find out, we can always, if this is an accurate update that, because this comes from WIAA, so you'd think they'd have it right, but we'll have to double check it.
Okay.
What's been moved and approved as in its current state? Any additional comments or questions? If not, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, and then you'll double check.
Yes.
Anything updated, anything's happened, okay. All right. Move on to item 10.3, the collective commitments and clarifying responsibilities of the school board.
So the board's familiar with the documents. This is the work we've been doing with Drew Howick, and this was part of what we said we would do, is bring it back so that the board actually adopts it, and then we can laminate these things and put them in your drawer. So that points of reference as we continue to, the board's work to get, to improve just the way we're trying to work to improve all parts of the organization. And I think making it public and taking action on it is a strong statement about the work we're trying to accomplish together. So I think it's a pretty kind of cool move for a school board. Stephanie, if you want to add anything?
No, I agree with that. I think that we've done some really good work in trying to make these agreed upon and some language that we're comfortable with and the sentiment that we're all comfortable with. I think it also gives us a good template moving forward as we continue our work in the district, to have something that we can reference. I mean, we all go back and reference our strategic plan regularly, and that this falls into certainly those pillars of the strategic plan as well. Plus, it's just something that we can always go back to and say, as we have questions and comments and as issues arise and comments come up, that we can go back to this and say, let's go back to our collective commitments and figure out what we need to do and how we need to respond and what next actions are. So I agree with Dr. Lexman that this is a strong move for the board to take, and I'm in full support of that. So any comments or questions? No? If not, we look for a motion.
Second.
Okay, we've got motion and second. Any additional comments or questions? If not, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right. Go on to our next item, which I lost my agenda here. The item 10.4, the 2019-2020 Chapter 220 agreement.
So again, an annual item. We still have 5 students that enrolled with our district through the Chapter 220 program, which is a desegregation program that was developed many years ago to help kind of balance the racial differences between the city and suburbs. We're proud to be a part of it, and we want those 5 students to complete with us, but because we now have significant diversity, we're no longer eligible to enroll new students, right? So there's a kind of cap on the percent of diversity in the school district. And so we still have 5 kids that are working through, and we need the board to approve, again, the agreement so we can continue to work with those 5 kids.
Any comments or questions? Now we look for a motion.
So moved. Second.
Moved and seconded. Any additional comments or questions? Right, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. We will go on to item 10.5, the Employee Health Risk Assessment Incentive.
Yep, so I'll do a little introduction here, and then I'll turn it over to Jeff and Caitlin. So this is all kind of tied to the Wellness Center and our wellness kind of efforts to not only improve kind of wellness for employees, but also to manage healthcare costs. And so we introduced the Wellness Center, then we introduced a health risk assessment, and now we created an incentive to participate in that assessment. And I'll use myself as an example of, so I take the health risk assessment. I have some risk factors that aren't unusual for somebody my age in a high-stress job. Just leave it there. But if it weren't for the fact that, you know, I can refill prescriptions for free at the Wellness Center, I wouldn't go back after that, right? And so what have I experienced, because I, you know, refill prescriptions, is Zach sits me down and talks about diet and exercise and all the kind of things I should be checking in on and be held accountable for. So I think that's helpful. And so now we're interested in taking another step of how do we incentivize or encourage employees to, if you have risk factors, to engage more in the Wellness Center, to really use it to help us manage, help me manage the factors and help us manage the costs associated with trying to insure people with those factors. So with that, I'll turn it over to, for the details of what this would really mean if the board approves it and how we would implement it.
That was very well said. Just a little background, back in 2017, the board approved a $50 a month reduction in premium costs if an employee participated in the health risk assessment. And so that happened for 2 years. The idea behind that was to get as many employees to participate so that they could get those results that Dr. Lexman talked about. The data that we've talked about in our health steering committee and with Hayes, the data shows that we have just a significant number of employees participating, but we're not seeing the follow-through in regards to taking that next step. So I get my result, and basically now I'm getting my reduction in payment. And so in our conversations that we've had, it's been brought out just through the data that's been collected that 95% of high-risk members feel that their health is fair or better. And also another, I guess, point that I wanted to point out is that chronic conditions drive up about 37% of medical spending. And so our proposal is kind of a proactive attempt to try and address health and wellness for all district employees. And basically, depending on your assessment that you receive through the health risk assessment, if you're low risk, 0 or 1 risk factor, it'd be 1 annual wellness visit with Zach. If you're a medium risk, meaning 1 to 3 risk factors, it's 2 visits throughout the entire year. And finally, if you're high risk or there's an immediate need, you would have to go quarterly to visit with Zach throughout the year in order to get that $50 payment reduction.
So how are the risk categories determined? So how do we pick what's considered a risk factor, I guess? And are there going to be categories of them, multiple things within a category? And so how is that all being determined? I presume this is going to be published somewhere so people can look at it.
So the risk factors or the indicators that the health risk assessment focuses on is blood glucose, cholesterol, blood pressure, and then I'm not sure what that is. But, I mean, it's the report that each employee gets is broken down, score and then the normal score depending on each one of those indicators.
So these indicators are already determined. They're already getting that on their sheet.
That's your feedback.
Okay. So they know what those were. So they've seen they've got 1, 0, 7, whatever. They know what that is.
Yep.
Okay. And then based on this, if they have 0 to 1, they have to go to 1. And that's even if they're under the care of another doctor, right? This is outside of their normal, whatever physician visits they have. Say if they're a diabetic or something and they have regular visits they go into anyways. They still have to go to see Zach
Correct.
X amount of times depending on risk factors they have.
Yes.
Okay.
If they want the reduction.
Right, right.
It's not mandatory.
Jeff, is this the committee that you sit on?
Yes.
Do you have any other feedback for the board in terms of what was discussed in committee and how this all came together?
I guess, I was talking to Jeff about it at one of our committee meetings, and when I say we, I mean those of us on the committee.
Sure.
Expected a little bit more pushback from some of the teachers, but they were behind it. Yeah, if you got something, maybe we need to do a little extra to push them through. And the big thing was, and if they don't want to do it, they don't have to.
It's optional.
It's optional. It is not mandatory. Because when there was a little talk of the mandatory, that didn't go over real good.
And if I could add one thing, our first health committee meeting that we had, the representation wasn't the best. And so we've been trying to be proactive in getting more representation from all the buildings. And just some of the the second meeting, we had more participants. And it was encouraging.
Reflecting their building's
Yeah.
opinions. Yeah.
Okay.
And the conversations that were shared is that they talked about it as a staff, and it was positive feedback. And so they took the information, discussed it at health steering committee meeting, went back to their buildings, talked about it, it was positive, and then that's what they brought back to our second committee meeting.
Okay. And I think we have a unique opportunity to utilize our wellness center, which is already in place, and kind of be a leader within the community. There are some school districts in our area that are already doing this, but not everybody. So we have that chance to kind of be ahead of the pack in terms of wellness in our area.
It says 4 quarterly visits, it's 1 quarterly.
One per quarter, yeah, 4 for the
Four
entire year.
total.
Yeah.
Any other questions for Jeff or Caitlin? If not, we'd look for a motion.
Move to approve. Second.
Moved and seconded. Any last minute questions, follow-up, comments? If not, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? And that passes. Thank you. Okay. Caitlin, you want to sit down there, I
Yep.
guess. Item 10.6 is the food service contract.
All right, so we have our Sodexo team here today. So we went through our RFP, so our request for proposals, which is something we have to do every 5 years with our food service management company. Everybody that was on the RFP committee scored individually the 4 proposals that we received back, and then we met to discuss. Each one of them had strengths, and some of the categories that we scored on, which is per the DPI RFP structured contract, structured RFP format, cost and guarantees to the food service account, on-site manager, involvement of students, staff, and patrons, and promotion of the food service program within the school district. So those are some of the categories that were scored upon, and after each individual committee member scored on their own the 4 proposals, and we came back to talk, Sodexo continued to stand out from the pack. So we're excited to bring forth the recommendation to approve Sodexo for another contract term.
From the committee, are there any comments on the committee?
So yes, I was a member of the committee as a board treasurer, and the proposals were very interesting to see all the different things that are out there. I think that there's definitely, from hearing from other people within the community and people who participate in food service, there's definitely things that can be improved upon, and that will be communicated with Sodexo in meetings moving forward. But I think right now with the situation, that it's a good move for the district to move forward with Sodexo.
Yep.
Yeah, thank you. I just want to thank Sodexo for their services throughout the years. I think you've done an awesome job. I think that it's easy as another company can come in here and try to underbid. That's easily done, but when you have to be in the trenches with Sodexo people, they're always there. They're there for the community, and they're there for the people. So I know there were quite a few negative comments that were out there. I think that people should take a look at those negative comments and just brush them to the side, because what Sodexo people are doing is a great job. Thank you.
So to Noah's question about, feedback and suggestions and enhancements to the contract, what is the current structure for, is it a quarterly sit-down, like here's what's going well, here's where we want to tweak, here's some incentives or some ideas going forward? What's that going to look like if this contract is approved going
Yep.
forward?
So one of the great things about Sodexo is that they are always open for feedback. So I talk to Steve Cosner all the time, and principals talk to him all the time, but we do a formal sit-down once a year for our district priorities and communicate those, what we're looking for that next year. But we do have constant communication.
Yeah, sorry, excuse me. In that kind of formal once-a-year sit-down, it's not just sitting down with Steve, but they actually bring in kind of local and regional kind of managers, supervisors that are part of that conversation. So I've always appreciated that.
Just one more comment.
Yep.
The other comment I wanted to make is that Sodexo, I think at this point in time, is trying to develop even better focus groups for the community and for the students in the district. So thank you again.
Any other questions for Caitlin or comments? If not, we'd look for a motion.
Move to approve 10.6.
Second?
Moved and seconded. Any additional comments or questions? Not all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, that passes. All right, we will take a quick 5-minute break then while we go ahead and take down cameras and get ready for our 2 workshops
Before we
tonight.
break-
Oh, sorry, Jeff?
Is it possible that we could give a little shout-out recognition to our chef here that influences the
absolutely.
people at Central?
Very nice.
Absolutely. Good,
Chef
good
Jorge,
job.
everybody.
Oh, that? Oh, lower tomatoes. Oh, okay. Okay, I guess we're not going to take a break before I take down the cameras. So we will be televising both of these workshops today? That's what I've just been told?
That's the
so-
plan.
Okay. I apologize, I didn't get that one memo.
Okay.
So we will just continue right ahead and go on to our workshops. Item 11.1 is college and career readiness, the elementary report cards and grading practices.
Good evening, everyone, again.
Hello.
So as far as the grading practices, we're gonna start with that one, and what I did was I just put together, a quick kind of overview of where we are with our secondary grading practices, because our elementary grading practices obviously will be the rest of the focus tonight. And just to give some history and kind of where we are, and what some of the recommendations were that were made over time, as I know some of that's been a question for the board and for the community this year. So, just pull that up. Normally I have that little short break to. There we go. So, as you guys know, as from some of the things that I've shared in our board updates and some of the things that we've been working on is kind of the purpose of grading. Why do we give grades in schools? What's the point of it? And it should be to describe how well students have achieved learning objectives or goals established for the class or the course of study. They should reflect students' performance and specific learning criteria, and they should establish clearly articulated criteria for grades that makes the grading process more fair and equitable that the students can understand on their lens. So that's kind of and it's similar to the grading comments on the why behind grading that you'll see from the elementary team as well. The how of that is that our teachers need to know very well their domains or their strands, their I can statements, their Common Core state standards, whatever, put in the word you want there, that they need to base grades on explicit criteria derived from the clearly established learning standards that appear in the national standards, and that they need to clearly distinguish among product, process, and progress when assigning grades. And some of that has been a challenge for some of our teachers as we're working on some guaranteed and viable curriculum pieces, and they're more clearly aligned to each one of our courses and each area. Now it's become more clear what are the essential questions of that course, so that we can clearly articulate what are the expectations of the course, right? So that's all work that we have kind of going on in the process right now. Our history when it comes to grading and why we grade the way we do right now started in 2009. So in 2009, the leadership team at that time went to a seminar, their first seminar, on standards-based grading by a man named Doug Reeves, who's very well known in the world of public education and in grading systems. And then in 2009 as well, Tom Guskey, who is the other leading expert in grading systems in public education, actually came into our district and did one of our PD days for all staff. I think there's probably some staff here who could remember when Tom came and worked with our whole staff for a day, and then he consulted for the better part of a year in our high schools. And then in 2010, the building leadership team at that time, which was comprised of teacher leaders from each of the schools, began work on moving towards standards-based grading. So 2010 to 2014, professional development and discussions around moving our secondary practice to standards-based grading continued, but not a whole lot changed about the way we were grading. We had a few teachers kind of piloting more skills-based grading and things like that. But nothing came forward to the board as a change of policy. Nothing came forward as it was just more of a, let's all learn about why a shift in grading practice would be so important. So in 2014, a grading committee was formed, and that had, I believe at the time, members of the school board on it. It had community members, it had parents, it had teachers on it. And that committee worked for 2 years to start making some recommendations as far as what they would say is good grading practice for us as a district. In 2016, they came back and recommended that we use an 80-20 model of grading, and that we move to meaningful and authentic assessments. So that would be that 80% of the grade was based on the summative work and 20% of the grade was based on the formative work. And it was piloted by certain teachers, but nothing came forward to the board at that point. We didn't change policy, we didn't do any of those things. That was just the recommendation coming out of that committee at that time. And again, the teachers' feelings were, well, we just need to understand more about what do you mean about meaningful and authentic assessments. What are you looking for when it comes to that? So we had another leading expert in professional development. It was teachers and in public school and grading come in and work with our secondary schools for a whole day. That was Myron Dweck. And he came in and did a similar kind of makeup to that work. So when we had then a shift of leadership and a change, things kind of went on pause for that first year while we just sort of assessed where we were with some of our grading practices. And then we gave out the first employee engagement survey, and what came back from that survey overwhelmingly and the feedback was please fix the elementary report card. And so our employees were asking us, and some of our teachers will share their feelings on our elementary report card as it stood. Our employees were saying, like, of all the things I want you to fix, that is one we have to do something about sooner than later. So we paused our kind of systems and our practice and our development around that secondary grading committee. Not that we haven't continued to work on standards-based grading or skills-based grading or grading on competencies. You know, that all means the same thing. But we really shifted our focus to focus on the elementary report card and the elementary grading system, because that was the feedback from our employees that needed to get work done. So where we are today is 80-20 is the recommendation. Our policy is not yet changed around that. So our board policy on grading hasn't said, like, that's how you have to grade. That's the recommendation that was made by the committee at the time, and we haven't made any other recommendations outside of, we've spent a significant amount of our curriculum writing time working on authentic assessment. Like, what does it mean that we actually know what skills students have and which ones they still need to work towards, tied to standards. We've aligned resources that should be creating more time in classrooms to be working on those authentic assessments. And then that secondary report card / grading committee gets started again next October, because now we've decided to shift our focus versus changing how we do things at the secondary and having that roll down to the elementary. Again, based on the feedback from employees, we started at elementary and we're rolling our way back up. So that committee will get back going again in October. Adam's really looking forward to taking on another one of those, as this one for elementary has taken about 2 years to really get solid product, to make sure that it's going to work well with our technology, to get it onto Skyward, to get feedback from parents, and you'll hear from a parent tonight, to put together the survey, to get feedback from the greater community on making that shift. So we will dive far deeper into our practices at the secondary level and continue to do the work through curriculum writing on what does it actually mean to authentically assess students and their performance. The question that we get asked a lot is around turning in late work. And much of that is related to credit recovery for us. And so for credit recovery, at the end of a semester, if a student gets at the secondary level, so this is specific to the high schools particularly, under a 49%, the student has to retake that entire course on Edgenuity. It's kind of our benchmark rule, is that if the student gets under a 49, they retake the course on Edgenuity. For kids who score between 49 and 59.9, because a 60 is a passing grade, we ask the teacher to go back into the grade book and look which units of instruction, what skills were being assessed during that time that the student may have failed. The teacher is asked to copy those units and turn them into somebody in the office, either it's usually the deeper learning coach or the assistant principal, who then creates a schedule for those students to meet after school, in the summer, sometimes in Saturday school, depending on how the structure is set up at the school level. And then assignments are typically given back to that teacher for grading, which then would get the grade to a point of being passing in that course. We do ask teachers to take assignments in the course of the semester if that's when a student has demonstrated mastery. But it's also really important that those assignments are meaningful and connected to the students, because then the likelihood that they're doing them as they progress through is a lot more likely that they come in a timely manner. Adam and I were talking about today, we don't think Jordan, who did the boat launch in the pool, which was amazing, We doubt that anybody in that group had a hard time knowing when those were due and getting them done on time, because it was meaningful and authentic to them. And so we need to make sure that that's the practices that we are doing, and that is what many, many, many of our teachers are doing, so this isn't a criticism of them. It's as we shift our work into our deeper learning work, we want to make sure that we're shifting the way we think about what does mastery mean and what does passing a course mean, looks like it as well at the same time. Any questions on kind of where we are with secondary? I know.
So you mentioned about the credit recovery. Is there any sort of time frame for turning in these assignments when they're, you know, so is it determined, they only turn the assignments in if they're in that 49 to 59 range? If it's 49 or below 49, then they do the whole thing over?
They
in
retake
engineering?
the whole course on the
So
new
if it's in between that range, then the teacher has to go back through their grade book, say, these are the units that this student did poorly on, and then find assignments they didn't turn in, or create new assignments they have to do about it?
Typically, it's the assignments that go with that unit of instruction that they otherwise would have given, right?
Okay.
Because the idea there is that was what we decided, or that was what that teacher decided were the competencies for that course, right? So the student needs to demonstrate those competencies. So sometimes it's a slightly different assignment because they did a portion of it and they just never finished it. We want to make sure they really have demonstrated mastery in that whole thing. But that student should be putting in, they're putting in time beyond the school day to do that. That's not, and occasionally they pull kids from study halls and things like that in order to get that to be done. The two high schools, the two comprehensive high schools structure that differently at each high school based on kind of what's going on at the high school level. Adam and I don't monitor that end of it. That's kind of on the schools to map out what that schedule's gonna look like and how they're gonna get access to those students to do that work.
And then the time frame?
Oh, the time frame. So, Adam, help me on the policy. So it is, they have 1 year beyond that semester. So if they finish in,
Not for late
Not
homework.
for late homework.
To complete the course to replace the grade.
Right, for
Okay.
credit recovery, right?
credit
And then
recovery.
beyond that, then you have to retake the course from start.
Okay, so you have 1 year to get credit recovery. For late homework, what is the time frame?
For late homework, that's kind of set at the building level and by the teacher. So the teacher can choose. We encourage teachers to take the assignments to prove competency in the course, because one way or the other, that's what the student is gonna end up having to do, right? But we don't necessarily have a policy that says when that happens, from certainly the full district level or from the board level.
So no policy either way? Like, there's not a requirement to take something, it's up to the discretion of the teachers to determine if they're gonna take something late?
Yeah, and the
Or what
principal
the
will
timeframe
work
would be.
pretty closely with them you'd have to have a pretty good reason to not want, if the student did all the work and wants to prove that they've demonstrated the competency for that course, right, we'd have to have a pretty compelling reason not to take that from them, right? Because at the end of the day, your hope is that they've put in the time they needed to show that mastery. That's what you're hoping for. So we do certainly encourage teachers to take work in a reasonable time frame of when that happens in the course of the semester.
Okay.
Yeah?
Do the teachers have enough time to do this, to go back and to look over and to look into? Because I know that there were a couple situations where that didn't happen. So I'm just wondering what the policy is. If there is no policy, can we produce a policy so that that'll protect the teachers, so they have a time frame to get the students to get this done?
For credit recovery or for late assignments?
For late assignments.
For late assignments?
I would think it all links together, though, as far as late assignments and credit recovery. Excuse me.
Yeah, can you just clarify for me, so what would you be asking us to do? To create a policy that gives them?
I'm just questioning if a teacher has enough time to submit some of these things. In other words, we all know that teachers have a very hectic day
Yep.
and very heavy schedules. So I'm just wondering when the teacher has time, if they do, to look at this.
Yeah, to look at some of the late assignments that are turned in.
To
and
look at
some
all the
of
late assignments
all of
that are
those
turned in.
assignments that are turned, yeah. So there are certain times where the teacher will be gone for the summer, and then we have to have somebody else with that same qualified certification help out with some of the grading, or to help out with some of those pieces to make sure that that gets done
I'm talking more in school.
in school.
When
Okay.
teachers are in school.
Yeah, I mean, I can certainly talk to the two building principals. We've had lots of situations where we've allowed somebody, if they were behind on paperwork for whatever reason or things,
Okay.
to utilize some professional development time or get some support if it was really a problem.
So does this cover FLW also, or are they kind of excluded from this, homework situation where they turn in late homework?
The same thing, right? So we would want, there's competencies and there's skills tied to every course, and so we would want the teacher making sure that the student was able to demonstrate those competencies. That's how we kind of know they're ready to move on. So we would encourage them to be connecting with the students and doing some goal setting with students, so students are taking the ownership of the learning. At the end of the day, that's a big chunk of what our deeper learning work
Right.
is about, so that we're not, the teacher shouldn't be the one having to find all the students and figure all that out. We're hoping that we're working towards getting the students to take some ownership of that, know when things are due, and in some of our deeper learning communities, there's a ton of evidence of
Right.
that. That the students are taking far more responsibility for that.
Right, and-
But ultimately, yes, we'd like the teacher in the course of the semester, otherwise we don't know for sure that that student is ready to be moved on to the next course.
Right, and again, I just want to make sure that we give the teacher time to do those things. The other thing is from an elementary level, you and I have discussed a few things elementary-wise, so I hope there's going to be some follow-up on that.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Right?
In terms of the late assignments, how are we working with kids to prepare them for the understanding that as they move to the next level, that's not the norm? In college, you have due dates. In work, you have due dates, and those things need to be accomplished by those dates. So how are we working with them to get them to understand that this situation does not carry over?
Yeah, and that's a great question, because obviously there are expectations around all kinds of things that you're hoping you're teaching those work habits and skills while students are in public school. It's a really important shift as we look at that self-directed learning competency and the deeper learning competencies, right? And so the leadership team will have the full day on Thursday, kind of dive deep in, how do we ensure that students are taking responsibility and ownership for their work, right? Because it shouldn't always be on the teacher. It should be a collaborative community where people get the job done, or they get exceptions to that, just like you would anywhere that you went. I will tell you that, teaching a class most recently at UWM, I took work throughout the course of the semester because kids, the students there had life circumstances that created situations where they couldn't always get it in by the deadline. I had a firm deadline by which I needed to turn in grades to the university, so I had to have it all by then, and you had to be able to demonstrate that you could keep up with the coursework week to week, right? So there's like that line of wanting to be flexible when students have life situations, but there's also that teaching them how to balance, and that's why the self-directed learning competency and the deeper learning work is so important, because it really should be around students taking ownership of that process and knowing their obligation, especially when it comes to group work or group projects, that a student needs to know, like, if you don't do your part, it's not just you, it's a community of people around you. So we're keeping pushing on that.
Okay.
And then we're measuring some of that work behind some of the scores that we see in Panorama. As we work on the student scores around grit, and especially even social awareness, like how do you fit in the course of your day. There's all kinds of things in Panorama that are helping us to start ferreting out, is that getting better, is it getting worse, what could we be doing differently? Where do we see some pockets of success at grit, and are those schools where assignments aren't coming in as late? Okay, well, then let's look at it. What are we doing at that school that might be creating that situation that we can then hopefully transition and shift to other schools? Yeah, no?
So one more question, I heard something crazy, the timeline thing for you about this returning in late
Yeah.
work is important to me, so if someone takes a class freshman year and they don't turn something in, they don't get till their senior year to turn it in, right? So, because you said a reasonable amount of time, so I mean, it's kind of an open-ended
Yeah,
time frame.
right. For late home, at that point, right, if they failed the course, they'd be in credit recovery.
Right.
Right, so
But
when
if
the
they didn't fail the
semester is
course.
done and the
Yeah.
grade is entered,
Yeah.
unless it's through the lens of credit recovery, which is part of our board policy on graduation, right? So unless it's through the lens of credit recovery, no, we shouldn't be taking, work the whole rest of your life, right? There's a point at which the grade is calculated and it's in your GPA, and, otherwise we'd have students, we frequently have students within what did Matt say, a 1/1000th of a point at graduation between number 2 and number 3. Well, if we just took homework whenever they felt like it,
Right.
some of our students would be trolling through every class that they had all the way through high school and going, well, I'm gonna go back and turn in this homework for sophomore year so that I can be that 1/1000th of a percent or whatever he
Right.
said, ahead of other kids. So no, it's when the grade is complete and the final grade for the semester is entered,
Yep.
is done.
That's
And then
done.
you're in credit recovery going forward, should you need it.
And that's 1 year.
So maybe an unrealistic scenario, but if a student had a whole entire semester, decided at the end of that semester, I'm this far away from getting that D to pass the course, they could turn in all their late homework. But would that really be enough, if it's only really the 80-20, to bring that to that D? And would the teacher have to accept it and take full credit?
You know, that's a time when hopefully the teacher is working closely with the student and the family and the building principal and the counselor, right? So those individual scenarios would be really hard for me to respond to from my seat. The statistical likelihood that you could pull it out at the 11th hour, occasionally, yep, it happens. But that's a time, it's not willy-nilly. You know, it's nobody is going into that and going, okay, Suzette, if you just cram tonight and turn in 66 homework assignments by tomorrow morning, voila, here you go, right? And although it happens every year that week before graduation, that we always have a few students who are just attempting to eke by to walk across the stage. I field phone calls the night before graduation until late into the evening frequently around all kinds of things. But yeah, that's a time when it really would be up to the discretion of the building principal, and they'd be working with the deeper learning coach and the family and the student and the teacher to try to navigate through. So it'd be hard for me to say yes or no to that, because I wouldn't know all the circumstances there. And I wouldn't know how the teacher has set up the grade book, and I wouldn't know how that was all kind of managed. Any other questions for me on that one? Okay, so now to one that is super exciting and kind of a labor of love for Adam and the report card committee, who I'm sure Adam will recognize as he goes forward, but you should know that this is a group of teachers, and there's a smaller group with us tonight, as today was their last day of reported work for the school year, but we have a smaller group with us tonight that thankfully was willing to come and share their experience, who had piloted the report card in their classrooms. But it really has been a lot of hard work and dedication from that team over 2 years to come forward tonight with their recommendations.
All right, I'll invite them to come and sit up here if they want to or don't want to. So I'm gonna pass out just a little envelope here if you just wanna take one. So, yes, as Deidre said, if Jane wouldn't have retired tonight, our participation would have been a little heavier because several members from the committee were Hoover people, so they're all at her retirement party. So if you just kind of open that up, we're going to empathize for a moment. I only photocopied the first page, but imagine that this is your son or daughter's report card, or maybe even your report card. Give me a second to kind of take a look at it. Yep, one page.
They were handed out in non-labeled envelopes, so we're clear, they were not specifically given to anyone.
They weren't specifically given to people, I mixed them up. So if you look on your envelope, to give you a little bit of a better lens, you should see maybe a 5K on it, so think of yourself as a kindergarten parent or student. The 3rd grade SPED and 5th grade GCT. Okay, so think about that as your lens is shifted a little bit. We'll get some feedback here in a second. So we've got 3 different lenses really that we're looking at for this piece. You'll see some of you might have gotten A's, some of you might have gotten D's, some of you got some checks, some slashes, some minuses. What do you think that report card is communicating about learning?
And just to clarify, SPED stands for special education, so that's a student identified with a special need. And GCT, no, is gifted, creative, and talented. So those are our students who test in that 95th percentile of culture.
All right, anybody have any thoughts on that? How would you know, I'll give us a starter, how would you know what grade level this report card was actually for? Does anybody find any indicator on there of what grade level this actually is?
Very top.
very top. So what does it say there?
Well,
K-5.
yeah, it doesn't say
K-5,
specifically,
right?
it says K through 5, yeah,
K-5.
correct. This is a great place to
How
be.
about, did everybody get like maybe an A in fractions this quarter?
Yes, I did.
You did?
I
So
did not.
why don't you guys have grades for fractions? I mean, if you're a kindergartner, aren't you covering fractions? Or algebraic thinking as kindergarten, that's one of our Common Core state standards, is algebraic thinking in kindergarten. We have a kindergarten teacher over here who's laughing. So, as you can see, there's a couple holes in our current practice. So, as Brian pointed out, I think the first one is what's wrong with this picture is it's a K-5 report card. Everybody gets the same report card, no matter if you are in 4K or if you are in 5th grade. Everybody is scored on numbers in base 10, addition and subtraction, multiplication, division, fractions, algebraic thinking, etc. So really, this 2-year project that we've been working on is really, we got a lot of different objectives. So we have communication to not only students, parents, stakeholders, teachers, school board members, principals. There's a lot of different necessary components to our communication that we have to have in probably the most forward-facing document that every single K-5 parent in our district gets. We wanted a way to measure academic achievement, so we want to know whether or not students are actually meeting standards. We want to be able to use our report card in order to drive instruction, inform teachers of what to teach or what to reteach, and then to inform stakeholders of academic progress and use in our goal setting and our goal attainment. So those were really 2 years ago, maybe 21 months ago when we sat down. These were all of our project objectives as we kind of looked through this. We used the design thinking process, which I'll go over in a second here. Excuse me. So going back to our strategic plan, so we have a number of different components of the strategic plan in our strategies that we've used. Deidre talked about that earlier in our feedback when I started this committee 2 years ago. We were getting a lot of feedback on the Studer survey and the employee engagement that the elementary report card needed to be fixed. It was no longer assessing certain things that, it was no longer really representative of what we were doing in our classrooms. If you go, I only gave you the first page, but on the second page, there's a piece about rights to communicate using 6th straight writing. We haven't used 6th straight writing in the district in over 7 years, but it's still on the elementary report card. So really we're, in our college and career readiness building block, we're looking to teach all students using high standards in a curriculum that provides consistent foundation and includes differentiated personalized learning and timely feedback for growth. It's defining that shared vision and the definition of excellence and our focus on equity and diversity. And then in the bottom there, embedding deeper learning competencies at every grade level so students are able to collaborate with others and contribute to the greater school community. And then in terms of service to our stakeholders in our community, we're really looking to implement multiple methods of transparent and consistent communication, which I'll talk about for all of our stakeholders. And at the bottom there, using survey and communication methods to establish and support a revised method involving parents to encourage more involvement in the school community. So really our lens is what are we holding in common across our 11 elementary schools? So the first piece, which you've heard Deidre and I talk about, is our guaranteed and viable curriculum. Same slide that we've used for 2.5 years, really grounding our work. And that comes from Marzano, so ensuring that all students have the equal opportunity to learn. As we talked about last year, those transition into our I CAN statements. And you can see those are by grade level, they're published on our website. And they're really the basis for a lot of our curriculum writing projects that are going on in the elementary level. And there's many other areas that are included in our instruction that either the classroom brings or the teacher or that community brings in, the needs and the interests of the student population. So although you might get, a standard might be, I need to add, 2-digit by 2-digit numbers, well, the teacher's gonna learn what that community is really looking for and tailor that lesson to what their specific needs are. But we've set our bar of where every student needs to be in certain grade levels with those I CAN statements. And then lastly, we have our deeper learning competencies of content mastery, effective communication, critical thinking and problem solving, collaboration, self-directed learning, and academic mindset. So, how did we get there? Like I said, we used the design thinking process. So we were building empathy, very similar to kind of exercises, little quick exercise that we did here. We're learning about the audience for whom we are designing the elementary report card. And really looking at who is my user and what matters most to this person. Then we're defining, so we're creating a point of view that's based on the user, brainstorming, creating multiple prototypes, and then testing, which I'll go through here in a second. So we really had 4 big problems to solve. And these we identified probably within our first maybe 2 to 3 months working as a committee. So the first one is equity is not at the center of our current report card. There's some language in the achievement summary grades and the responsibility and effort grades that's actually a little discriminatory, and it's not really inclusive of our environments that we want for all of our kids. Like we said, every student kindergarten through 5th grade gets the same report card with the same learning descriptors. Our third problem was the philosophical idea that kindergartners can receive a D. So if you look at the achievement summary grades, a D is student work contains many errors and demonstrates minimal understanding on most grade level benchmarks. So work that has many errors should receive a D. And when you look at the responsibility and effort grades, students that are inconsistent in applying learning to assignments, collaborating with others, participating in class and turning in assignments on time. And the biggest thing was adult support is needed. That technically should receive a D if you're receiving adult support for completing some of these tasks.
And that kind of created a different problem for us over some time, is that if you're following those descriptors to the letter of the law, if you're working with students with special needs, the likelihood that they would be in the range of being able to work independently, that's sort of their individualized education plan determines that they frequently need supports, right? So then you've limited kind of that range. You also have kindergartners and first graders getting C's and D's on their report card as they go forward. So what it led to was teachers don't feel good about that moment in time when you're writing like a C or a D, and especially for our youngest learners as their entry point to school on that report card. So we started saying, well, but they're trying really hard, and they're really working. So we just thought, well, let's, make the grade maybe more reflective of that. And so then we started getting a lot of feedback. Well, my child got nothing but A's and B's all the way through elementary school, and now they're at middle school, and they're suddenly seeing grades that aren't reflective of that same kind of effort. And so we went back and said, okay, we have to accurately grade that. If these are on grade level benchmarks and grade level standards, we need to really make sure that they're accurate, and they have to go by the descriptors that are on the report card. So we saw an influx of C's and D's on elementary school report cards, and as a parent, certainly I wouldn't want to see that. As community members, you don't want to see that. One of our parents is here tonight that's going to talk about her feelings about the new report card, because that's not a great moment for anyone, and so that's kind of led to a further problem of the grades in elementary school then trying to be articulated at the secondary, and they really weren't going hand in hand at all.
All right, so our process that everyone has kind of partaken in here, and
I'm right next to you, yes.
So we had a representation on our committee over the past year and a half. We've had pretty much represented from nearly all buildings in all curricular areas, just as we had for the ICANN statements as we developed those within the department. It was not Deidre and I who were sitting there making the music ICANN statements. It was the music teachers who made those. It was the PE teachers who made those. It was math teachers who made the ICANN statements for math. So we have Cheryl Bond, who's teacher at Jefferson, Jess Geis, teacher at Jefferson, Kristen Swoboda, deeper learning coach at Mitchell, and Casey Milroy, teacher at Irving. So like I said, there's a Hoover contingency out there too. So we've really developed in the process of, and I started early on by saying, this is a decision that as teachers, we would make together. I did not come with a prototype of, here's what I think we should have, and then we just tweaked it a little bit. We started basically with our report card that we currently had now, and we said, we used a SWOT, so we identified strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats about our current report card. And then we looked at probably 30 different report cards over the next 6 months to say, ooh, I like this part from Greenfield. I like this part from Boise, Idaho. I like this part from NPS. I like this part. And we just kind of picked those. And then we started to build our iterations. So I think right now we are on prototype 7. So we've gone through 7 different times, each like really flushing out ideas over the course of a month. And you can see from the pictures there, we just started like, literally, we would just put in a room 15 different report cards, and we'd write what we liked about it in green, and we'd write what we didn't like about it in red. So then, as we started getting some of the different prototypes, I'll go back to that slide, we identified some key components. We needed to have grade level specific report cards. It was no longer acceptable to us that a kindergartner and a 5th grader would have the same report card. We had to have positive and inclusive language, and it needed to be reflective on what is being taught in our classroom. So one thing that's come up a number of different times, you'll see them shake their heads when they make the comments, is because our system that we have right now and our method for reporting out achievement doesn't really match what's happening in the classroom. So the typical teacher spends about 8 to 12 hours writing comments per quarter on those elementary report cards. So we said, if we could get the report card to actually assess what's going on in the classroom, there's no longer a need for that. So those were our key components that we kind of flushed out within our first couple months of our meetings. So then what happened was we kind of landed on 2 key components, which is what really my purpose for bringing this forward tonight. The first one is, so we had the ICANN statements and the Guaranteed and Viable Curriculum that we went through the board last year. And those are our very forward-facing documents for new teachers, for parents. They're written in parent and student-friendly language, so students actually understand what's going on. You can go in any of our classrooms around the district, and you will see these posted in classrooms, whether it's the mastery target for the day, or if it's the overarching theme for the unit. But you will find these living in our classroom on a daily basis.
And that it was purposeful this year to go also back to some grade level teaming across our district for one of our PE days, which we got a lot of positive feedback from teachers saying that kindergarten teachers from across our district could meet together, and then they could talk about that guaranteed and viable curriculum. They could talk about what that looks like in their classroom, and they had the opportunity to give input on that, give input on report card things, all the way across. And again, in the employee engagement survey, not having any of those guaranteed and viable curriculum come up as an area for growth the first year, it came back strongly as an area of strength last year, and then that collaboration around it and some of those shifts came back again as indicating that a very strong thing from our employees, that they appreciated that time, and that these guiding documents have been very helpful to them.
So the second piece that we identified as a committee was the idea of mastery, progressing, and not yet meeting as our achievement descriptors. So really, as we have here for achievement descriptors or ABCD, switching that to mastery, progressing, and not yet meeting. So that idea of mastery being that the student is meeting and or exceeding grade level expectations presented during this quarter. The student applies key concepts, processes, and skills required of the subject area with consistent accuracy and independence. And then progressing, the student is making progress toward grade level expectations presented during this quarter. The student is able to apply skills with increasing success, but performance varies. Student is beginning to grasp and apply key concepts, processes, and skills. And then not yet meeting, as the student is not yet meeting grade level expectations presented during this quarter. At this time, the student does not yet demonstrate understanding of basic concepts and skills independently or with additional support, and the student is having difficulty grasping key concepts, processes, and skills. So as we worked on these achievement descriptors, this was, I believe in prototype 1, was these 2 key components. We started to get feedback from our employees. So within our strategic plan, it talks about how we consistently look for feedback and decision-making that impacts our employees. So we involve them in the process. So I sent out a 3-minute video kind of explaining exactly what I just talked about. I'm sorry, I put principals first. So we threw it out to principals at one of our meetings. I just gave you an example of one of our feedback mechanisms. So we use a stoplight, so green, yellow, red. Green is I absolutely love it, no problems. Yellow would be I can live with it and I will support it, and red is absolutely not. So we threw out this idea to principals, to elementary principals, of having the mastery, progressing, and not yet. And as you can see, it's all green. So that was last spring worked over the summer, came up with a new prototype. We've started to embed the deeper learning competencies in those I can statements as those revisions have taken place over the course of this year, and they will continue also this summer, so as those are evolving, probably starting tomorrow in some subject areas. So December, right before Christmas break, I sent out a 3-minute video kind of outlining these different pieces about the I can statements, the mastery, progressing, and not yet, and asked for some very specific feedback on those 2 points. So as you can see here, 50 out of 58 people who responded for elementary teachers to the survey, and these are all the different buildings, I just covered up the names. They gave it either green or yellow in using those I can statements, as those would replace the, like, uses math language to communicate thinking orally and in writing, numbers in base 10, etc. And in using mastery, progressing, and not yet, instead of A, B, C, D, it was 58 out of 58 teachers had responded that they could, that was either green or yellow. So that was it, yeah.
I see there's 2 lines that have no, this were 2 schools not
Those were
present, or
2 schools that I did not get feedback from. They're small schools.
just didn't provide feedback?
No, nobody responded to the survey.
Okay.
So then we went feedback from parents after we probably came up, this is about prototype 6. And this just went out about a month ago, maybe 3 weeks ago. We sent out, I sent out a 5-minute video, recorded essentially components of this slideshow, and sent that out to parents. And we had a pilot also in a couple classrooms here, and they got some feedback. So very simple 2 questions. I like the use of I can statements, strongly agree, disagree, or strongly disagree. And then I like the use of mastery, progressing, and not yet for achievement descriptors. And on our responses, so I like the use of I can statements. You have 70.1% of respondents said they strongly agree or agree the use of I can statements. Now, I can tell that you're saying 45 plus 24.4 does not equal 71. We also sent out the survey in Spanish and got some respondents, so I added the 2 of those together. And then I like the use of mastery, progressing, and not yet for achievement descriptors, showing that my student is working towards mastery but might not be there yet. You have 62% in the strongly agree and agree categories. Yes?
So, I mean, there's a significant percentage of people who strongly disagree. So is there going to be, if this progresses moving forward, is there plans to try and
Yes,
show
so
them the way?
like one parent emailed me and said, she like found out who posted the video, like specifically sent me an email and said, I support this, but I'm voting on it without really knowing things about it. So if there's increase in communication, which I'm going to talk about at the end here, they said that I can fully go to that. And she said that her only hang up was, this is how we've always done it, so why would we change? But I think that from some of our evidence from our teacher feedback and the research that we've done as a committee over the past 2 years, change is not necessarily a bad thing. And then our last one was the proposed report card, really meshing those 2 things together, putting the I can statements in combination with teacher comments. Clearly communicates important information about my child, because I didn't want people to say like, oh, now nobody's going to write comments after. Was 67.2% in favor as strongly agree or agree. So one of the pieces, Noah, that we talked about, so in looking at how to explain this to parents, and I have too many tabs open, so I can't really see. Yeah, that's like my to-do list. I'm just gonna put the wrong link in there, sorry. Let me just give me 1 second.
So while Adam's doing that, I don't know if you guys want to make some more comments just kind of on the process or where the feedback was so important. I will say about the survey, although there is a percentage of people who did select strongly disagree or disagree, we got a pretty significant number of respondents to the survey, and so for that large of a percentage to be in favor of these changes, you know, you are not going to get 100% of the people to support it. And so most of the time when someone doesn't support it, it's because they don't understand it, not because they have some vehement objections to what the content is. And that's what Adam and the team are working on. And Casey, who's doing her internship hours for her Director of Instruction license, has Adam as her supervisor. So you always give the interns a task. And Casey got this one, lucky one. Got this one as hers. And we have a few interns all summer who have a variety of different things that they get the opportunity to work on. But maybe if you guys want to just speak a little bit around kind of your process in using the report card, or some of why it was so important to you to put the time in on this committee to make sure that we made some of those changes.
Well, one thing I can say is when the teachers in my building found out we were, redoing the report card, they literally were like jumping for joy, because this report card that we used, as you saw, it just wasn't reflecting what their child knows. And because it wasn't reflecting that, a lot of us were spending paragraphs and paragraphs writing. We were basically writing a narrative report card is what we were doing to give parents, because we wanted the parents to get accurate information. And, as we're moving, one of the things, I piloted the report card, did you,
Yep.
and Justin too? I had the fun pleasure of doing both kinds of report cards that quarter. And so I got to do the really fun long one, and then, I got to work on this one, and just even doing the two of them, I just felt like the pilot report card that we're working on so much spoke to what my kids, I just felt like it really spoke to what they knew. And I felt like it was giving the parents so much better information, because it's grade specific, it's based on the I can statements that they're familiar with already, because we have been teaching the parents, we're on year 2, so we're still in the process, but they're presented with these I cans, and it just makes sense. This is what your child's learning in the classroom, this is how they're doing on it, and it even for staff people, I think it's helped make, when I was doing the second report card, I felt like I was really reflecting what I'm teaching. And it, our older report card is just very challenging to do that, so.
I think the piloted report card took a fraction of the time, simply because we have the data, we have the student work to showcase and to show if they are progressing or if they do have mastery in that skill. And for that reason, I really liked it. I received all positive feedback from my parents, but I also was available to them if they had any questions, so they could shoot me a text or write an email or make a phone call. And we did talk about that, and Adam might speak to that. This year, or if and when this gets rolled out, we would like to do it during a time that we have access to parents, so they can sit down, we can share it with them personally, one-on-one, instead of just sending it on email and just, having them.
Yeah, we
continue
had talked
to-
about possibly for this first year of rollout, whenever it happens, if we could hold off report cards till parent-teacher conference, the first one, which would be a perfect time, because most parents do come to that first, and we nab them, and we've got them sitting live next to us, and I think that'd be a great time to go through the report card. And usually it's about a week or two after, but we're hoping for this first time we can kind of combine that together. And also with the goal setting that we've been working with our kids and self-directed learning, I could not sit with my kindergartners and first graders and talk to them about their report card, because they didn't even understand it. With this one, I feel like I would be able to do that too.
I actually do with my class. They understand the I can statements, so they are part of this process. And I think taking initiative and taking the ownership and working on these I can statements provides the independence that they need to go on to secondary ed. I just had really good work with my kids.
And some of the terminology, the not yet terminology was really important, because that's that inclusive language. Not yet is different than you can't, right? And a D says, ooh, I wasn't very good at that. Ooh, right? Not yet says, no, you can still go master that skill. That's still an important skill. We chose it for a reason. You're just not yet there. And then here are some other opportunities that you might have to accomplish that task or to achieve that goal, or to, and the report card is a report card. At that moment in time, the student didn't have the skill yet, but yet means that it's our anticipation you'll gain that skill. You just might not have been ready yet at the time that we assess that skill.
And that process is just an expectation in elementary ed.
we're constantly reteaching, trying new strategies, getting support pushed in, so that our goal is to master a skill.
So, thanks for your patience. So Casey's been working on, and I'll let her maybe highlight a few pieces if she would like. Really understanding your child's report card. So it's kind of designed as some communication of what each of those pieces mean. So this would be really nice for a parent and a teacher to sit down, like Jess had talked about during that first parent-teacher conference, to like really dig deep and explain what this means. So it really just talks about what those mastery progressing not yet means. Here are the learner expectations of what happens kind of in that classroom, and then what's measured on there. So it is the I can statements, and for all of the different core areas. So there's some pieces like this whole front part that really is explaining why we use the I can statements, what that academic measures of progress are for your individual students. So this would be, and then we'll get Tess to kind of pretty this up in that regard.
Yeah, we just talked why, what's the purpose of a report card, and so amongst lots of like conversations through the process of creating these report cards, we determined that, and so that's part of that document. And then we also looked at some other districts in the area that communicate the purpose of their report cards and describe each component. And so just using those resources and the conversations that we had as a team, I just put together kind of like a cheat sheet for how you can read your report card and understand its purpose and what it's communicating to you as a parent or community member, and then how you can work with the teacher of your child to kind of form a partnership in, with the report card and with their academic progress. So.
And it's a lot easier from the lens of a parent when you've got your I can statements and it says not yet met. Well, now I specifically know something I can do at home. Whereas a D doesn't necessarily tell me, like, okay, so they're not doing a boatload of things independently. Like, where would I even start as a parent to know specifically what are some things we can reinforce at home?
So we've talked about in our committee as well, if, as the messaging around this and having some pieces in that career and college readiness and our tab for leadership and learning, and be able to have like, here's a sample report card, and I can hover over the I can statement, and it tells you like, this would be a sample problem of what this looks like. So then you can have parents that can look at that at home, because as we started way back in that empathy phase, we were like, okay, so it says here, multiplication and division. Well, those are two very, very, very separate skills. I might be awesome at multiplication, but I might not be really great at division. So does that give me a C? Does it give me an A? Does it give me a D? What kind of piece is going on there? Whereas as we have those I can statements where it's skill-based and specific learning targets for all of our students to really raise that bar for them, the parents are able to understand what we're actually asking. We've also started some work on, the math committee is starting some work on having their assessments actually line up with the I can statements. So when we have our guaranteed and viable curricular guides that are for teachers, they actually have like, this is how I would assess this I can statement, so I could report it out on the report card. So as we continue that work over the summer and how that evolves over the next years, that'll set us up for some really nice continuity and support for all of our teachers. As I think when Deidre and I think we've shared this before, it's Deidre and I, when I stepped into this role 3 years ago, I said, hey, what do I do if a third grade parent like asks me what they're gonna learn? And we'd say, well, I guess we'd like direct them to Common Core. And Deidre and I have been working with the university professors, with some of the people that we're mentoring, and we were talking about our GBC documents, and she was just amazed at what we were able to put together as not only a forward-facing document for parents, but also, because that's available in parts in parent-friendly language, but also the rear-facing document for staff, where they understand like what resources I might have to teach that, what's key academic vocabulary, how would I assess that, how do I spiral that from a concept that might be typically taught in January, but how do I start laying the groundwork for that in September?
I think too, as far as an equity piece is concerned, it's this report card in conjunction with the GBCs. It's going to guarantee that every third grade teacher all 11 elementary schools are teaching the same I-10 statements, are assessing the same, I-10 statements. I think that's really important too. Where right now it's just so general that, of course, we're following the Common Core, and of course, everyone is doing their best to teach everything, to fidelity, but this really solidifies exactly what's expected. I think that's important too.
I'm just gonna make this a little bigger. So this was, we've been working just in Google Docs at this point, and some of like what the actual, because for a while we were like, ooh, do we like the logo on the left side, or do we like it on the right side? Like, where should we put the tardies? And some of that is gonna be a little bit like out of our control. It's gonna be where it's placed in Skyward. We got a little, we were like, I don't think we actually get to decide that. But the idea that even as our pilots, they just sent it out in a Google Doc. I can see some of them have them printed off there. Like, this is what your parent, this is what a parent gets. I can add and subtract multi-digit whole numbers using the standard algorithm. Now, some of these have changed a little bit as we've invited a more parent-friendly language. But those addition, properties, and subtraction rules. So they're identifying there for that scale, are you able to add or subtract that? I can multiply multi-digit numbers versus one-digit numbers. So as we go through there, there's typically, as you guys have seen these before, there's typically we try to keep it between about 10 to 14 I can statements for the year. And we'll work with Skyward as to, the first quarter report card isn't this long, and then there's only scores in 4 categories because we've only covered the first 4. So we're working on some of those communication pieces with Skyward as well, because obviously we want to show some growth over time. So that might be maybe a not yet for finding the area of a rectangle and solving problems. It might be a not yet in the first quarter, but it might be a progressing or a mastery in second quarter and moving forward. So really, like Deidre highlighted before too, that idea of not yet, as many of you have been in our schools, you see growth mindset stuff around all the time. And as Cheryl and Jess were talking about the goal setting components that are so essential to getting some of this work started and understanding what I need to know as a learner is really important. And we're conveying that within the report card.
Dan?
Thank you. I don't want to put you on the spot, but I'm going to. Ms. Svoboda, how do you feel about this over at Mitchell?
Yeah, I think that the process used really engaged staff. So, for example, we had a lot of Mitchell teachers invited to participate in the committee, and they were able to give feedback. So similar to what everyone else is sharing, our teachers didn't feel like the report card communicated clearly what the students were working on, so they really appreciated that. Our kindergarten teachers especially felt terrible when they had to give kids D's on the report card because they, again, kids are making progress, but it wasn't clearly communicated that way. So they were really happy about the I can statements and then also the mastery and, grading that way instead of the traditional A through D. So that's kind of the Mitchell, I guess.
Thank you, I appreciate that.
And just so it's clear, teachers from across our entire district were all invited to be on the committee. There was not 2 seats for the school or 3.
Oh.
Yeah, no, but Kristen, you said teachers from Mitchell were invited, and that's true of all of our schools. We had some of our people who were really impassioned around the work. So as normal with the committee, especially when it takes 2 years, I think there was about 50 people at the first meeting.
Yes.
And about
Significantly.
10 diehards at the end that stuck it all the way through. But throughout the course of it, as Adam indicated as well, our PE staff had opportunities to give input, and music teachers, and our teachers of students with special needs, and our GCT staff, and everybody in the course of it had the opportunity to give feedback and participate. Again, you're never going to get 100% of the people to say, oh, I love that. But I think we had a really wide representation to offer support and feedback on it as well. Dan?
Yeah, my other question is, I'm all about change if it's going to enlighten the community, enlighten the district, and enlighten the children. However, I'm looking at a situation that might exist. How do you find out through this grading if a child is having issues in regards to not understanding numbers? Let's just say they're dyslexic and it doesn't get caught. How is there a catch on this one? Where's the net to find that particular issue that might come up?
Well, I would have to say if there was something like that going on, that would be communicated with the parent and with the support staff much earlier than reporting out on a report card. So we have our CST teams and our what was it? MTSS teams, yeah, they changed the name on me, I'm sorry.
Okay.
Together, so the minute we see a concern, we contact the parent, we let them know that we're going to go in front of a team of resource people to figure out, is this something that is a concern? Is it valid? Here's our data that we show that there's something going on much sooner before this report card.
So is
And-
this a current standard practice in the schools right now that you're
Yes.
able, it is, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think, Dan, just to kind of add to that, that I think by isolating it to individual skills, if you had a pattern or a number of the same kinds of skills, like, wait a minute, the student is able to do these, but when it comes to the ones that are around number recognition or whatnot, we have consistently marking not yet. It would certainly be cause, as you do your kind of, when you sit down to do the report card, you sort of think back on the course of the quarter and you think, oh, well, you know, maybe I saw a glimmer of this here or a glimmer of this here, but when you kind of put it all on paper, you sometimes come to the conclusion of, oh, wait, there might be something more here than maybe what I was thinking, and then that would be a process that you would use to refer the student to the MTSS team. No?
I just had a question, is this current ABCD used in all elementary schools?
Yes.
Yes.
Because I don't see that on my kids' report cards.
Oh.
I've never seen an ABCD, I've only seen
Oh, really?
pluses and slashes.
Oh.
So that's why I was super confused,
yeah.
I'm like, what do you mean, I've never seen any letter grade on my kids' report card?
Yours are still pretty little.
My kid's in third.
Well,
This is gonna start to
that's
twelfth grade.
surprising, because that is not, looking at each other like, well, yeah.
I'm saying my actual kids' report card.
Right, doesn't have that on there. Mine does, and my children are here, and mine does, I know that, so, and Stephanie, does yours?
Yeah.
Yeah,
well, and
so
Wilson
out of the
did
same
too,
school,
so,
right,
yeah.
so,
Well, you Wilson, Wilson, I don't know.
I don't know.
Do you,
Hold on.
do you have any roadmap or target date at which you say we're gonna lock the prototype?
Yes, so, in communicating with tech, our tech department, so in order for them to, like, they have to go in for each descriptor and change those and put in those I can statements. They need that like July, like sooner rather than later. So our goal is,
I was putting it on a quick deadline.
they said they would need, because they
I
don't,
know.
as long, they can change anything in here until like the first person that puts in grades. So that's really like September 5th, before a teacher would ever like touch a grade book.
Right, yeah.
Which is actually a little later than that, but, so, we told them that we would give them a deadline of like early July, so they have 2 months to build that. So that way we can say like, oh, I don't really like this. And we do have some curricular work going on over the summer as well. There's some teams, like I said, there will be teams who start on some of those I can statements tomorrow in developing those, in certain curricular areas.
So they might get refined,
And I know
but.
you'd wanna be agile, but at some point in time, you do
Yes,
have
you
to
gotta
lock
have
it.
to lock
Right,
it in.
and that's why we wanted to have the workshop with as much time to get as many parents participating in the process as possible, but then it'll come forward to the board for approval 24th. So that we have, so tech has more than enough time to play with the semantics of it, or like the look of it. Like Adam was saying, where does the logo go, or where do you put Tardy's? Some of that the technology department needs time to work with Skyward on what does it look like, and then usually Frona's really good about giving us back hey, if we make this flip here, it looks like this. If I put that over here, it looks like this. This is how you're gonna get it to fewer pages. And so then that gives us enough time to futz with some of those things and make sure that it really isn't like a 72-page report.
And it's another question, now if they go into Skyward and let's say you have something and they say, well, we don't know if we can do it this way, do we go back and modify the prototype, or do we go to Skyward and say, Skyward, can you make that change?
Yes, Skyward will take care of 90% of it on their end,
Okay.
and they work with other districts who have, there's a few districts in our area who use something similar to what we're proposing.
Oh.
And Skyward has worked with some of those districts, so we don't anticipate any of that being a problem, but that is the other goal at not approving this in the first meeting in July on the 1-week deadline, like it's to give Frown and the tech team enough time, and they're fully aware this is coming. It was part of what delayed it last year, was there was not enough time to get parent feedback and get it to our technology department in a reasonable amount of time for them to turn it around. So everybody this year is really prepped and ready to go, just waiting for some kind of final feedback.
We do
Yeah.
have a parent here that has sat, had come tonight, we want her to speak. She was from Jessica's, right? Yeah. And her daughter is Izzy.
Izzy is fourth grade, going into fifth.
And we thought it might be kind of interesting to just hear your thoughts. If you don't mind.
Definitely open to change, and as a parent, reading the old report card compared to this is night and day. So it's easier for me to understand what she is understanding at school, what she may be lacking a little bit at, and then exactly what they said, what I have to do at home as a parent. I've since day one, since she started school with kindergarten, my husband and I have always pushed the I can, so to see the I can is huge to me. Because we always tell her, you don't ever say you can't do something until you can. So definitely seeing this is a push in the right direction. I definitely would like to see this implemented. I think the only thing that I have like a little hesitation on is maybe like, and obviously right now when they're younger, it matters but doesn't, but like as they get older, are we gonna be able to see like somewhat of a percentage? Do you get what I'm saying? Like,
Yeah.
I understand the mastery.
Yeah.
And it does make sense, because in the
Right.
real world, as adults, some of us are better at other things than, the rest of us. But maybe just like something where it shows when they get older. I don't know how to.
Yeah, I think
if
maybe.
you understand what I'm saying.
I do, yeah, and I think that's what Adam was saying, like about the math ones, when the curricular guide, the assessments in there match these exactly, then when you come to the parent-teacher conference or what's available in Skyward, you're actually gonna see, okay, so your child scored 3 out of 4 on this, that determined that they met that standard, and then you'd be able to see those things, because they're all aligned.
Yeah, but definitely, it's definitely made a world of difference in her academics, definitely. From last year and this year, she's a totally different student.
Why do you think that is? I mean, what's the reasoning behind it?
I don't know if maybe it's an age thing too, but I think, just the pushing of letting her know that she can do it. Like math was never her strong suit. She definitely has come full circle, and she definitely is probably right behind there with her other academics, because she was told she could, and I don't know, as a parent, we're very open with her, so we don't it's not that she doesn't get to see her report card, she gets to see everything, so she understands how she's doing in school. So I think, showing that and getting the parents involved, and telling them that this, is a new way, and it helps the student to progress easier.
Right. I think you hit on a key element, getting the parents involved.
Which is hard,
Which
because
is
we all have
extremely
different
difficult.
lives.
You bet.
And we're in
I-
a very diverse community, which makes it even more difficult.
No.
So, yeah, I mean, it's a struggle, but I think it can be done if we,
Well, yeah, you're talking about we can.
Yeah, and that's part of the goal, is that the ICANNs are written, and some of them, that's where Adam said, a few of them do need some revamping, in parent-friendly language. So as a parent, right, who's not a teacher, right, then you at home. Don't make a face like that.
Well, and I
teachers
was-
don't.
you guys have my utmost respect. I could never do what any of you do on
But
a
as a
daily
parent,
basis.
then you could, it's clear and specific.
Yes.
Exactly what needs to, what are the skills that are missing, right? And so therefore, and what are the skills that your child has mastered, right? So Izzy, you know
Absolutely.
that at class now. Is that true, Izzy?
And Izzy knew it.
Yeah, you know,
Student.
like the
Yeah.
things that you finished, and you
Yeah.
could check off your list, and then you know which ones you're working on, so that when you talk about it with mom and the report card looks like that, was that easier to talk back and forth then? Yeah.
Well, other thing is, I think you would be a good asset to this program to be able to talk to parents, if you're comfortable with that. You presented yourself really well here this evening, and you're welcome. You've seen a positive with the system, so I think the teachers are ready to roll. So I'd like to see the parents ready to roll on this, because it's not always easy, so I appreciate you coming here this evening.
You're
Thank you.
welcome. Thank you for having me.
We all do.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you very
Thank
much.
you.
That's what we all do.
Any other questions for us?
I have a
Yeah.
couple of comments, just real quick. So, taking that into consideration about, your initial comment, Adam, was about, this is how we've always done it. That was some of the feedback that you got for why we made these changes. And obviously, that's something that we've tried to never stick with, because that's not who we are, and we know that that's not how growth happens and how progress is made. So I like the idea of having some kind of instructional that goes along with that. So I would hope that when we come forward on the 24th, that there maybe just is at least that roadmap about how this is going to be communicated, what tools will be available to the families in the community. You mentioned that perhaps there's an interactive tool online per grade level that says, you hover over it and it gives you some examples of what would be at the ICANN for first grade in this particular ICANN statement. So to have those, if that's the plan, what that's going to look like communication-wise, what the schools and the teachers are going to have available, if there's going to be rollouts or programs or announcements or whatever that is, just some kind of a general outline, even though we know that that's just an outline, so that we can, in good faith, also know that it's not just being rolled out, here you go, here's this great thing, but do with it as you wish,
Yep.
but that the support plan is behind it.
Yep, you bet.
Well, I also think Skyward can help with that, correct? As far as that goes.
A little bit, like how to, the functionality piece is yes, but I think what Stephanie's talking about is kind of that philosophical shift
Yeah,
and
no,
making
I
sure that
understood
people
what Steph was
understand that. So
talking about.
both, yep, I would agree with that.
Okay.
Bill, you had your hand up too?
I was just gonna say, one of the most important words I heard was partnership. And this gives us the ability to have a partnership with the teachers and the parents and the students. So that's really important. That's a very important word that I think should be communicated, overly communicated, is partnership. Because that's really what this ultimately is.
Well, I definitely think the biggest thing is just, for my part, is seeing the teachers being more hands-on with the parents. I'm definitely a hands-on type of person, so seeing the involvement from her this year is, oh my gosh, it was absolutely amazing. And I think that this report card definitely has made a difference in that. So,
And I will say this, and there's a lot of kids that don't have parents and don't have that support, so it can still be a partnership between them and the teacher
Yep.
yes.
to understand what they,
Yeah.
Well, I think it
Right.
always has been, though, a partnership
Yeah.
with the teachers and the students, so. you
But
know,
it's a
this is
tool.
just
But I
a-
think
This
this
is just
is-
a better tool
Right.
that, you know,
When the
agree with
student
that.
can better able, I mean, we've seen an increase in a lot of our parent engagement at some of our parent nights when it's a student showcase, because the student is going home and inviting their parent into that space much differently than when we'd say, oh, we're having a math night, right? So we're seeing a very different level of parents feeling more of that partnership. This communication going back and forth where the student is saying, yeah, Mom, come to conferences because you're going to hear about how I've done these 10 skills and how I'm working on these in a way that makes it okay that you haven't figured them all out yet. That's a really different lens, and it just lends itself as students grow up, kind of to get back at your point from earlier, Brian, how do we push that ownership of the process? This is a big first step. Right, and then that's why we then need to quickly turn around with some response around how we respond to what we're grading and how we're doing that at the secondary, because once you get students saying, well, wait a minute, how do I know what I'm doing well in your class and what I'm not? We need to make sure that our teachers are prepped for that and ready to, have the skills they need to respond to that.
Well, I think the other positive thing about this is that when the young adults go into Frank Lloyd Wright or Lane, and then they get to Central or they get over to Hale, that they're definitely going to be able to know what they can do and what they can't do. So that's a good thing. And then that leaves room for even more learning, which is good.
Great. Any other questions for us? Yeah, sorry, Marty, go
Yeah,
ahead.
so-
You haven't said anything.
Right, but I wanted, and that's fine, I don't need to say stuff. But what I thought maybe is helpful for the board is that this conversation has gotten really, really into details that are really, I think it's important for you to understand it, but that's usually, the board is usually at a, 10,000-foot view. So let me kind of knit a couple of these pieces together. So if you think back to when we launched the strategic plan, one of the first things we wanted to work on was this guaranteed viable curriculum. And get some consistency and some commonality across all classrooms that are teaching third graders, for example. And that led to some of the common assessments that then are in common, obviously. And now an aligned report card. And what this is really building is an infrastructure that lives in the background, that helps guide us and gives us then the room to innovate in deeper learning, right? Because now everybody knows in third grade, these are the specific things that we want young people to be able to master. But how we get there, that's the innovative part. How we get there using the deeper learning competencies, that's what we're asking teachers then to use their talents and their gifts to make learning really engaging. But you can't do that if you're not really clear in the background if this is what the target we're trying to hit, right? And so that's what all of this really does for us. And ultimately, how we get there is really deeper learning, but it won't be successful if you don't have this infrastructure built. So we're in a pretty good space with both of these kind of paths moving together now.
Okay, well, thank you all very much for everything.
Thank you very
And
much.
we look forward to having
much.
it come forward on the
I
24th.
appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay.
Do you want your report cards back in?
Mine actually spells bad. I want to burn mine. It spells bad. B-A-D.
I had more C's and D's than anything I wrote, so I'm going to ignore that one.
All right, then we'll move on to item 11.2, the Financial Stability and Efficiency Workshop on the proposed 1920 budget and preliminary tax levy number 2.
Okay, Caitlin will be coming up and joining us.
Thank you. Congratulations again.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sodexo.
They know more about report cards than they need. So with the next workshop, Financial Stability and Efficiency, the proposed 1920 budget. So we're going to take another step with the board to help guide some decisions that we have to make to get to a balanced budget, right? And so we did one step with the survey and doing some prioritizing. So we got kind of the big buckets prioritized. And then there are some options inside of those that we need some input on. Working with Stephanie and Heather, what we came to is that this is going to be an explanation. Caitlin's going to kind of walk us through a tool and a number of kind of options that we're considering, right? So, and they're tied to the big items that the board prioritized. And then we're going to give you a task to do, which is this is going to be one of these green dot tasks, and she'll explain that. And we'll put out on the tables the various options that we're considering to get to a balanced budget. And you'll have green dots to be able to identify what you support. So that's kind of the big picture of what we're going to try to accomplish. It doesn't mean this is the final version of the budget. We just need a little more guidance from the board to make sure that we're moving forward with a final set of recommendations that match the priorities that you're establishing.
Marty, I do have a question. So previously, has this been discussed in the financial committees as far as where we want to go and where we're headed?
We haven't done the specific
I didn't say
1% equals
specific.
this,
Is it just
20% equals this, so we haven't gotten
discussed?
to this detail level yet.
But it hasn't been discussed.
Yeah, well, I mean, we've talked,
We've had initial
Okay,
discussion.
Big
that's all I
picture.
want to know. Thank you.
okay, so while this is loading, I'm gonna just go through this sheet in front of you, if everybody has one. Okay, so just some reminders about back to a couple meetings ago where we were at with the building sale. And the board recommended that option number 4, we called it, which the breakdown of that was the following. So $2 million of it was recommended to be put towards something for the future, whether that's Fund 38, Fund 49, capital improvement, that's yet to be determined. Part of that option was $3.8 million into fund balance, and then $800,000 toward those debt payments that should have been part of our 18-19 levy that weren't. And the reason I bring that up is because when we walk through these options to balance our budget, you may want to just keep them in the back of your mind, potentially reconsider, or remind yourself of, okay, this is what we decided back in April. So, okay, I'll just log in quick. Okay, whatever. We'll just go off the paper. Okay, so currently our projected amount that we need in order to balance our budget, so the deficit that we're looking at right now is $6.125 million. So that's what currently we're looking at in the hole, just projected for 1920. And our goal is to get to a balanced budget. A reminder of the priorities from last meeting that we looked at, based on the board exercise. These were the priorities, the 5 we call them big buckets for a technical term, of how we spend our funds.
So what the board said in order of most important, so the board said was most important, was active employee compensation. The pieces that make up that are CPI, performance comp, and supplementals. And then the second most important thing that the board said we spend our money on is work environment, which we defined as class size, professional development, and building budgets. And then the next three in order of importance, so going down in, from most important to least important, was next was facilities. Then we had active employee benefits, so people who are working right now, what their benefits are, and then active employee retirement benefits, so people who haven't yet retired, their future benefits. And then also in this, in the budget that projects us out to be a $6.125 million deficit that we're working to balance right now, has the following assumptions. So these were decided on in the Joint Finance Committee. This is what they sent forward and has to be approved by both houses in the legislature. They have to approve the same budget. So the same assumptions or the same factors have to be approved by both houses. So we have a $679 per pupil categorical rate and $175 per pupil increase inside the revenue limit, which actually was just about almost the same exact thing as what we're using in our previous assumptions, which had just a $200 per pupil increase inside the revenue limit. So that brought us to about the same situation where we're at right now. So I'm going to actually talk through the different options. So you're going to see 14 different options, and I'm just going to quick talk through them, and then there's also an explanation. You'll read through them. It'll take about 15-ish minutes, and I'll explain how you place your dots. But before we do that, I'll just talk through each of the options that you'll have to place your dots on. Okay. So we have, the first one is performance comp. So, and again, all this information is on there, so you definitely don't have to remember it. But currently, we pay out $1.8 million for performance comp, and that's for all groups. So that's teachers and every other employee group, $1.8 million. So that's what's in the budget right now. That's assuming next year we're going to pay that out. So we could remove that. We could pay a percentage of that out next year. And what you'll see on the document that you'll put your stickers on is a 10% reduction equals this in savings. A 20% reduction equals this in savings. What we outlined is just kind of from our own brainstorm, but certainly not the end-all be-all. So if you have other options, we have Post-it notes, and we welcome any other comments you have. If you write, like on there, it doesn't say 100% reduction, like cut it all together, but if that's what you think is best to balance our budget, then write it on a Post-it note. Next one we have is changing the Consumer Price Index, or CPI. So currently in the assumption for expenses is a 2.44% increase, which is CPI. We could decrease that. We could make it a 2.0. We could make it a 1.44. We could make it a 1% increase. Those are just the options that are laid out on the sheets in the back, and it'll explain the dollar savings that are with that. Next, we have increased percentage of employees' share of health insurance. So what this means is currently the district or the employer pays 90% of health insurance premiums, and the employee pays 10%. If we increase that and said, okay, employees are now going to pay 11% for health insurance premiums, or 12% or 13%, that equals X dollar in savings. That's one of the options back there. The next one is an increasing the percentage of employees' share of dental insurance. So currently, dental insurance is 100% employer paid, so the district pays 100%, employees pay 0. So there are options back there if we moved the employee share to 1%, 5%, or 10%. You'll see that back there. Another option we have is reducing building budgets. So you'll see the different percentages or the different dollars that reflect a 2% reduction, a 5%, a 10%, 15, 25. And again, if you said, okay, what does it look like if we went to 50%? Put that on there and we can run those numbers and see where that would bring us.
Caitlin, is that still under employee or is that under work environment?
Building budgets is under work environment.
Okay.
And good call on that. So what I did, just to kind of like remind you of our priorities, is on the items that fall into the categories in our top 2 priorities, so the items that fall into active employee compensation and work environment, I put a Post-it note on there and just wrote active employee compensation and work environment, just to remind you, okay, this is what we said was our priority. The kind of give and take, though, is that those tend to be our highest expenses. So if we can find that balance That's our goal. Another item that you'll see is reducing unfunded professional development in Title II. So Title II is projected to reduce by about 50%, which would mean about $115,000 in expenses. We currently have assumed in our budget, so say we know Title's going to reduce and we're keeping those there. If we wanted to reduce those unfunded expenses in Title II, which is professional development, we show the savings that we could see if we reduced that by 10%, 15, 20, et cetera. We could wipe it all together. That's not an option, but just keeping your mind open that if you have an idea, write it on a Post-it note. Yep. Is there a comment? No? Okay. Another option that's in the back is utilizing $1.2 million of building sale proceeds for next year's Fund 49 budget. So currently we have assumed expense $1.2 million that we're going to pay for next year's capital improvement. So this says, okay, well, maybe we have to rethink our option 4 that we recommended before for a building sale, and we could put $1.2 million toward next year's Fund 49 budget, therefore decreasing what we have to pay from Fund 10. No.
So stuff like that, I mean, that's something that I would never feel comfortable doing unless I knew for sure our budget next year was going to be better somehow. So that, this whole one-time kicking the can down the road thing is really a one-time kicking the can down the road thing.
Yep,
Because we have this one-time chunk of money that we could do other stuff with. So do we have any implications that is in fact true?
Well, yes. So what you're saying is, if we use $1.2 million this year, that doesn't fix anything for next year. We're in a very similar position next year. We also know that we're dealing with projections right now, and these revenue factors are still up in the air. They could change. And also, year-end this year could change as well. So some of those things, so say we ended up in a much better position at year-end than is budgeted. Next year's budget is simply this year's budget rolled over. So we could, if we end up in a better position at the end of this year, realistically be in a better position next year. Right now, we're just assuming that we're going to break even. We're still contributing $500,000 to fund balance. Building sale is just a totally different story. And next year's budget is just rolled over, assuming break even plus $500,000 towards fund balance. So it's hard to say what next year looks like.
Okay, so I just want that to be clear.
Yep, so
Because you're
we'll do
talking about
one
these
time.
sorts of things, it's like, well, do I want to think about that? For me, I wouldn't.
Right.
But, so we're
Yep.
not like, oh yeah, we're supposed to have $5 million extra bucks next year, so that should be good. But if that's not the case, then I just want to
Yep.
make sure that's clear.
Yep. Thank you for bringing that up. Another option that's out there is, okay, so this one's just minimal, but it was part of, in the budget priority exercise, was a cell phone stipend that we give to our emergency personnel. And so just back there is not an option of like a breakdown, like 10%, 15%, et cetera. It simply says explore more options, so we can look at, okay, are the people who are receiving our cell phone stipend actually, do they need it, kind of thing? Are they utilizing a district phone or et cetera? Another option that's back there, and again, these are just kind of throwing everything out on the board, and we're welcoming your feedback, is increasing class sizes. So it says that elementary currently is 24-1 and secondary is 27-1, and so and all it says is explore increasing class sizes. So would be a task to say, okay, if we went from 24-1 to 25-1, what would that look like for a budget? We simply didn't do it because if everybody says, no way, we're not doing that, we're not going to look into it. So if you, yep, go ahead.
Does AGR make us have a certain class size ratio? No?
No, because we opted for the instructional coaching, so we invested in instructional coaching and rather than smaller class sizes.
Okay.
Good question. Another expense that's assumed in next year's budget is $500,000 to fund balance. So simply, it's a $500,000 expense in our budget. So if we decided, okay, with the building sale this year, et cetera, we don't feel the need that, or we can reduce it, put that on a Post-it note, but that's one of the items back there. And then a couple more department budget cuts. So there are notes for, I think, 5, 10, and 15% to department budget cuts. And that does not include tech and facilities because those are kind of on specific schedules. If you have other comments on that, like, okay, facilities will, let's reduce it anyway kind of thing, put it on a Post-it note, please. And then we have credit reimbursement. So currently, credit reimbursement is for administrators and also for emergency licenses. That's all in one bucket. So, and the dollar amount that we spend is on there, and it simply says, like, have us explore more. So if we wanted to, not have the administrator, advancing their degree type of benefit, then please note your thoughts on that. And then the last one we have is the health reimbursement arrangement for admin. So it's just one of the benefits that are part of the admin benefit package. They can opt to take their premiums after tax and then submit their premiums for reimbursement through this HRA, this health reimbursement arrangement. So that was a lot of information, and certainly enough to remember because it's all in the back. So, so just to keep in mind the priorities, you can carry it on the sheet with you. I also flagged the options that fall into our first two budget priorities. And then also, just want to give a huge shout out to Beth for making this activity possible because she helps me with those, and she's just all around awesome. So if everybody
Do you
could
give
take.
instruction again as to what,
Yes,
how many you
awesome.
get, what you're going to put them?
Okay, so there are 14, I believe there's 14 options in the back, and you're gonna get 14 stickers. So you could put a sticker on every one. What we're looking for is, because most of them say 5% reduction equals this, 10% equals this, put it on your the greatest reduction you would be okay with the budget moving forward.
Okay.
So if it says, 10, 15, 20, and you're like, can't do 20, but I could do 10% reduction in this, put your green sticker on that, 10%.
Okay.
And if you don't like any of those options,
No green sticker?
then don't put a green sticker
Don't
on
put a
that
green
sheet.
sticker, and also you could
Post-it.
write a Post-it note.
Right.
That's gonna be how we're communicating, so.
I'd really like it to
Put all your stickers.
I also have
No more stickers, that's
I
all.
have another important point, which is sort of a downer, but, so even if we max out all of these options, it just about breaks us even. So it's about, right now, it's still about a $300,000 deficit, and that was with me just putting in this budget tool. Right now, performance comp is 1.8 million, and on the sheet, it only goes up to 50%, but even with me putting in 1.8 million, like totally wiping it out for next year, it still put us at a $300,000 deficit with maxing out the other ones. So this isn't necessarily like the end-all, be-all, okay, we said 10% and we're all peachy. It's gonna be a difficult conversation, but this will help us in the right direction, and keeping in mind those budget priorities. And then also, we have some budget priorities that, like number 5, retirement benefits. Those pieces that are our lowest priorities aren't pieces that we can implement and save immediately, so they're kind of longer, you know what I mean? So like we have to plan, it's a huge project to work out the different options we have for that, and also if we implement it, if we went to a defined contribution plan, it could even cost us more money next year, the first year, but then save us down the road. So some of those things, those big picture things we're aware of, but they won't necessarily save us money directly next year.
Yeah, and another one that's an example is, so we were to increase class sizes. Well, we can't do that for next year. We're already
Right.
staffed and have offered contracts, right? But I think it's important that it's there because it's one of the big cost drivers, right? People. And so I think it's important that we get some feedback from the board around that particular item.
So you'll get 14 stickies, and you can put one on every single one, or you don't have to. And you're gonna, everyone that has the percent, you put one on the one that has the greatest percent that you are okay with for that reduction.
Super confused. So,
Okay.
as Marty said, some of these things, like even if we picked them, wouldn't help us this year. And you said that even if we picked them all, still don't have enough to make a balanced budget.
So that doesn't mean, so I didn't lay out like 100%, so I didn't even lay out 100% of performance comp, I just said 50%. So,
Right, but you said even if you did 100%, we'd still be 300,000 in the hole.
so what we're looking for is those Post-its are really gonna help us communicate, what other options are there besides these? And there's even a sheet that says other, so give us your ideas.
Right, and this isn't intended for us to get to a final balanced budget. It's intended for us to get some direction from the board, right? Because the factors are gonna change. And the big one is our year-end position. So we may come back with a really different scenario if we're sitting with, 200,000 or 2.5 million, right? That's gonna change quite a bit of how this might fit together for next year. But we need to continue to get direction from you just to keep the process moving forward.
Can I put my green sticker on the 2.5 million rather than the 200,000?
No, I would like you to, all 14. Right.
Okay, so everybody gets one big sheet, and then there's little individual dots, so.
Here, I'll take half of you, you want to take half? Or you take both and I'll give.
You do the little stuff.
Should have just
All
left
right.
them on the table, we can each take.
So
it.
they're all over there around the big table. Take a pen if you want to write Post-it
This
notes.
gives you 14.
I'm taking
Okay,
it.
thank you.
Okay. I'm just, then you're getting 4 little ones.
You want to start with
I'll
dots
trade
for
you a
your
green one for a
colleagues.
green one.
Okay.
All right, there you go. The rest of your stickers.
Thank you.
Sure.
Oh.
Potentially not.
All right, so they're all over on the big table.
Yeah.
But you were,
I can pass those out for you.
Food for thought.
Don't want to hit anybody.
1, 2, 3, 4, read it.
this happened way too long today.
Was that
This long in a while.
wait, how many?
12 is 12.
You didn't tell me. You got 2.
Sorry, Suzette.
This is the longest we've sat in a long time, so. It's 8:05.
You're only supposed to have 2
15 minutes, so maybe 20-ish? Yeah, we can say where we're at. We need. I gave you 2 minutes. And I probably, you got the right amount. And so who did I short? 2. There, I think I had a, just 1, 2?
These are the same.
No, this one was because of the rebuild.
Oh, that's right.
Oh,
It's one of these things, it's not like that.
Yeah.
We're so good at it.
Oh, not in. So, yeah, here, I'm gonna.
Is there one, does that mean we're missing one?
No, because I copied up, I.
That's the other one.
See, now there's only 15 on it.
Well, there were 13, that makes sense.
Okay, so I didn't write it down. When I wrote them down, I only had 13, and I thought there was something else. So there were 2 others.
Okay, good.
She did say 14.
She did, and we have 14 stickers, so let's screw that up. Should we give a sticker back?
Just.
Ooh, we got a wild card sticker.
Wild card sticker.
Something you really like, you just put that extra sticker on.
Can you just show me, because I feel like I always struggle with hooking my computer up to this.
So it's just this one here.
Yep, and then try it, because I always struggle, and then I'm like, I'll just, but normally this is on, I don't have to log in, so it's like, whatever, they have it in front of me. Okay, that's easy to remember.
You want these back, Suzette? Or Caitlin? Got our covers.
Chris and Billy, I used to get all my bikes. We had kegels last night. That's Julie. Yeah, so we got a connection. That's my nana. No, we don't.
That other option?
Oh, the passive fan? Yeah, I mean, she's been in and out.
Area code 313.
I just cut the cord with those guys. I have 8 TVs and I'm gonna save $460 a month.
I was talking to a guy when I paid my bill at AT&T, and I asked him, I said, you know, what's all this bundle deal? I said, I'm getting a separate bill.
Okay, Lynn, do you want to just come back around and just summarize like what happens next?
Sure, yeah, so.
Like how the clock is sitting. They took our clock.
I believe our next
They give us a TV.
Budget workshop is in August, is that right, Suzette?
That sounds
I
right.
don't believe there's anything in July.
There wasn't a.
No, there's no workshops in July.
So we'll come back, we'll take these into consideration, and then with this, we'll have to recommend some reductions in other places. So for example, one of those that only had one dot on it was reduce, or utilize 1.2 million of building sale proceeds for Fund 49 next year, which we talked about would be a one-time fix and wouldn't help us going forward. So that means we'll have to reduce somewhere else. So we'll come forward, you taking your recommendations there, and let you know how else we can get it balanced. Mhm.
Will, in our committee meeting, be able to maybe explore some of those other possibilities so
Yeah.
that maybe we could have some more things to bring to the board next time?
Sure,
around?
so what is your recommendation, that we come up with other ideas, or we
Well, I think
dive into
summarize
some of
what we
those?
have here, we can
Okay.
discuss what other possibilities that maybe have not been talked about yet, and then we can, as, you know, within the committee, obviously other board members are happy to come to that committee meeting as well to discuss other possibilities if
Sure.
they don't just want to email them to you.
Yep. So our committee meeting is Monday, so a week from today. So we'll summarize what we have here, and then some of those options say explore, and some of them are easier to explore than others. So we'll have some progress on that, but I can't guarantee that we'll have a dollar amount for everything that's set out on the table, so. Thank
Good.
you.
Thank you,
Thank you
Caitlin.
very much.
That's good.
Thank you.
All right, so now we will take a quick break to take down the cameras. And I apologize, I didn't see that, because it's always after item 10, and I didn't realize that it was after item 11 this time. So we will take a quick break while the cameras get down and get ready for our closed session meeting. So we are at recess.